right, so first of all, I'd like to thank Dave and all the panelists for a very thought-provoking and informative discussion. I really enjoyed that. Lots of good takeaways to my mind. One that's particularly apparent to me is the importance of planning in advance. All the panelists seem to have raised that. So things like thinking about what you're putting in well before it goes in the field, how different team structures might be more or less suitable to conditions and not just the machinery, and how solutions to practical aspects can actually depend on the benefits you're hoping to achieve by using an intercrop. And so having a good grasp of what it is that you want to get out of your team can play a real role in addressing some of your challenges. Playing around with seeding rates and plant density to help moderate maturity of crops. I think that's a phenomenally interesting idea from my perspective. I found that really interesting. I can tell you I'll be online trying to read up a little bit more about that this evening. The discussion around large versus small bits of kit, trends in development in that regard was also really interesting for me. The points raised in terms of the relative advantages and disadvantages of using contractors or cooperative systems, especially when you start thinking about seed separation, was really useful. And I think the point raised that it needs to be considered against the need to get things done on the land within often small opportunity windows was certainly something that needs thinking about on a long-term scale. The other thing I found particularly interesting was the fact that actually some of it has to happen long before you even start thinking about putting in an intercrop. The need for good quality seed, and more importantly, varieties that will perform as part of a plant team. Things at the moment just aren't tailored towards performance in an intercrop. And I think that really will be important going forward, is getting these varieties that will perform. And the final take home for me was open-mindedness and a flexible approach. I think, I think that kind of sums up the whole approach to intercropping. It's not necessarily straightforward. And so you need to be creative and willing to embrace ideas that you might have thought were a bit wild and left field. What about you, Adrian?
Well, I think you've nicely stolen all the things I was going to say, because my list starts with planning right at the top there. So yeah, you've illustrated that already. I thought good use of basic kit and tweaking came up again and again. It's not really expensive, clever stuff invented yesterday. A lot of it's just good use of what we've got. The markets, I thought, was a really valuable point about we don't have to keep growing more the same in the same way because the markets are the same. The markets can change and it can work both ways. I think that was really important. Flexibility, again, is something else I think you said there as well, comes into so many things and it's part of the planning. And intercropping is really about building in resilience. And that's all part, again, of the planning and the flexibility you bring in there. And you mentioned robots. Robots have come up quite a lot. We're not quite sure what they're all going to look like or how it's going to all work out in practice, but we're all fairly sure there's some great things coming in the future there, which are going to really facilitate doing a lot of intercropping better in an easier way as well. The thing about smaller, that was a really good discussion, I thought, just thinking about the scale again and the flexibility that gives and how the industry is going to really have to address that. And that's really a sort of approach which has got most potential. And then finally, just on a point brought up very early on, I think, on varieties and selecting varieties which are appropriate was brought up right at the end as well. But the ability of the system itself, how we do intercropping, to tweak that, so you can tweak things like density and proportions, which will interact with the varieties, but having those varieties in the first place that we can work with, and having the breeders working with the intercropping system and breeding for that type of farming. In other words, just changing the whole way we look at the whole farming system, right from who's supplying the stuff in the first place, right through to the end market. There's got to be changes all the way down the route for that. It's not just playing to the old agenda of big crops, big commodities, big markets, big acreage, big machineries and things like that. That's not what intercropping is. And finally, that just point I think Doug made at the end, and Andy said as well about diversity. I think we're only really learning to use a minimal amount of diversity at the moment compared to what we can when we really know or get our planning good and things like this. Much more potential there, I think. So I hope I didn't repeat too many of the points there. There's just so much good stuff there, which I think can really tax us. So great.
Thank you very much, Adrian. I am going to hand over to Ali Kali, I think, at the moment, to launch an exciting next step for DIVERSify.
Hello, thank you, Jen. I'm just going to share my screen. So thank you, everyone. And I think other thing that just occurred to me in summing up there is that I've also really enjoyed the discussion this afternoon. And our research on intercrops has only been possible because we work with people like Andy and Doug and Andrew and Graham. And it really takes this team effort with all these different skills and knowledge to make this type of cropping practice work and for us to gain new knowledge on it. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a heads up on some of the outputs that will be coming soon from our EU-funded project DIVERSify. One of them is a database of intercrop intercrop trials that have been conducted across Europe, and it's providing information about the performance of those intercrops and how they're managed in different countries and in different climatic conditions and soil conditions. So this is being developed in the DIVERSify project and is almost ready to be launched. So it'll be available on the project website, which is at the bottom of this slide, in the next few weeks. Another resource that we've developed is based on our own experimental trials at research institutes and research farms throughout the consortium. So again, they're across Europe, and this is a data visualization tool that's been developed by our colleagues at the James Hutton Institute. And I put this in because there was quite a lot of talk today about crop breeding and which traits are needed as a focus for using in choosing varieties for intercropping. And this resource will provide that kind of information about development times and how different varieties of crop species perform together when grown as an intercrop, with a focus on cereal legume intercrops. So that's actually already live. We just haven't advertised it widely at the moment, but we will do in the next few weeks. So now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Beatrix, who's going to tell us a bit more about this event that we're hoping we would like your help with.
So thank you, Ali. We're excited now to launch a challenge, which we are calling a prototype sprint. And it's going to be aimed at university and college engineering students. And we'd like to see if they can come up with some low-cost solutions for some of the technical challenges of intercropping. And we're calling our challenge a prototype sprint. So the slide describes how we envisage setting out the challenge, but we do need some help from you to prioritise some of the issues which should form the focus of the challenge. So the challenge itself will be held virtually and is open to both groups or individuals to enter. And the winning entry will be selected from a panel of scientists from the DIVERSify project. And then the winning entry will be invited to an award ceremony where they can present the design to farmers and machinery experts. And the winners will be offered a guided tour of the James Hutton Institute research farm. We'll also explore opportunities to realise the prototype with them. So in a moment, we'll launch a Zoom poll, which will appear as a little pop-up on your screens, and it will contain some of the key technical gaps that have been identified in the discussions this afternoon. These are general areas, and we're looking for your help to prioritise which ones we want to focus on in this challenge. So we'll use the information from the poll to help us define the challenge in some more detail, and we'll also be looking to our panel members for some advice from them on defining the challenge as well. So hopefully in a moment, the poll will appear on your screens. So you can just tick which one you think is the main priority and then click submit. And then once everyone's done that, we'll hopefully be able to have a look at the results.
So Tim and James in the background there, maybe you'll advise us when the majority of the answers have been submitted.
There we are. Okay, so looks like the most popular option was harvesting crops with different maturity dates and seed types. So we shall take a copy of that, and thank you everyone for your input into the challenge, and it will be advertised on the DIVERSify project website once it goes live. So I shall pass to, I think it's Jen now, to do the final thank you and closing.
Exactly what it says on the tin. I would very much like to thank Dave, Andrew, Andy, Doug, and Graham for their really thought-provoking discussions. Thank you all for putting your questions forwards. Thank you, Rogue AV, for tinkering with the tech in the background for us. And thank you to my colleagues at the James Hutton as well for helping to pull together what I think has been a really interesting afternoon. And of course, thank you all very much for attending and for listening in. I hope you found it as interesting as I have, and I wish you all a very happy evening. Thank you very much.